by Razbuten. When should a game end? So we'll see what he's got in store for us. I like this guy a lot. I've watched a lot of his
How do you
videos.
decide when you're finished with a game? That you've done everything you want to do and are ready to move on to the next one? For me, and I imagine a lot of others,
The end. Very simple. Beat the game, call it a day, the end. Just kidding. Let's see what he's got to say.
obvious answer is hitting the end credits.
Oh,
Occasionally,
see?
I
There you
will
go.
have the terrible idea to go for all the achievements, but typically, once the credits roll, I'm done playing the game, regardless of whether or not there are more things I could do. While credits seem like a formality, there's a fair amount of mechanical power to them. They provide a moment of reflection to look back at what you just played, and they signal that you've completed the main content of a game, the stuff the developers viewed as the core experience. Hitting the end credits provides that sweet sense of satisfaction that comes from accomplishment, and seeing them roll always gives me a nice final hit of dopamine. However, the sense of finality that comes with end credits makes it really hard for me to jump back into a game. Leveling up and getting new abilities feels great when it's helping me progress to that main goal of taking out the final boss or solving some grand mystery, but once that goal is reached, I don't see the point in doing that stuff. When I don't have something I'm working towards,
That. I agree completely. I am addicted to the grind of video games. RPGs are my favorite genre. They will always be my favorite genre. You start off, you're weak, you're meager, you die quickly, it's tough, no bueno, no good times. Grinding and leveling up as you go, seeing the sense of progression, seeing not only the stats increase, but bosses that may have been tough for you originally are no longer tough. You're able to just absolutely destroy them. Just the sense of progression is what hooks me when it comes to video games. What's up, Grupo? Um, once I've finished that, once I've beaten the final boss, I have no desire to go back and do any extra stuff after that. Something like fetch quests or completionists or, people that, grind for trophies, trophy collectors, things like that. Good for them. I support them 100%. That personally is not what drives me. It's the sense of progression. And once I've beaten the final challenge of the game, I'm ready to move on with it.
progression systems become meaningless. Like, yeah, I can do all these quests to get a cool weapon, but why do I need it if I've already accomplished what the developers wanted me to accomplish?
Exactly.
As my motivation stems from the desire
What's up,
to beat
Ronaldo?
a title, continuing after doing so always feels hollow. And look,
And
I'm sure a
nah,
lot of people are able to find
Messi's the
motivation
goat.
in just having fun with the game instead of needing to work towards some goal. And there are also lots of folks who find tons of value in how much extra content a game has. And, good for them. But I'm not built that way. I need to be working towards something greater. For the most part, I'm fine with not having the drive to continue with a game after beating it, especially with more story-centric titles. There isn't even that much to do after the credits roll except play it again. So more often than not, I don't feel like I miss out on all that much. But sometimes games introduce important content after the credits roll, and I always struggle with how to approach it.
So, good point. That's one of the reasons why I really appreciate games that have either secret bosses, secret final bosses, where after you've finished, the quote unquote final boss, you can go out, you can get stronger, and you can eventually find a secret boss that is much, much more difficult. One of the reasons why I love From Software and the games that From Software makes, like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, things of that nature, is you have the New Game Plus aspect, where you basically start over the game, but you have basically all of your gear, all of your items that you got from your first playthrough, and then you're able to quote unquote start fresh, but with that same power that you have, but all of the other enemies have ramped up in terms of difficulty. They hit way harder, they got way more health. So the sense of progression still kind of stands for me there, where once I go back and I start again, not only am I able to then fight those earlier bosses that might have given me a lot of trouble in my first playthrough, I'm able to absolutely wipe the floor with them, get that sense of like satisfaction where I'm like, yeah, I'm the boss now. But also it's testing myself where it's like, okay, I beat it once. Now the enemies are much, much stronger. Now the bosses are much, much stronger. Let's see if I can do it again.
Recently, this came up with Pokemon Legends Arceus. After the end credits, players are given an entire new quest line centered around capturing various legendary Pokemon. Out of all the story missions in
What up, Cheddar
Arceus,
Cheese?
about
Welcome
a
in.
third of them happen post-credits. And while not every mission takes the same amount of time to complete, this still makes up a huge chunk of the game. Between those missions and filling out the Pokedex, players could easily spend more time with endgame content than the actual game itself. Of course, as I'm sure you already can tell, I didn't do any of that stuff. There were new things to progress towards, but they didn't feel as important as what I had already completed. This sort of thing isn't inherently bad. Having a substantial amount of post-game content give those who adore a title more time.
I have so much respect for people that have to like fully complete a video game, that have to 100% it, get all of the trophies. Good for them. That's awesome for them. That's not me. That's not me whatsoever. I'm good. I am good. I don't need to go collect 746 and a half Korok seeds. I don't need to find all the newspapers around New York City. I don't need to look for all of the hieroglyphs in the desert. No. Just no. Absolutely not. I'm good. I'm good on all of that. That's awesome for them. That's what drives them. That does not drive me. That does not drive me at all. That's what I think a lot of developers do to pad out the runtime. Because so many gamers look at how much money am I paying for the game versus how many hours did I play the game for. And that's how they determine if it was worth it for them. So a lot of developers look at it as like, well, if we add an extra 20, 30 hours of meaningless side content, but that constantly keeps them in the game for longer, a story that takes 45 hours to complete versus the same story, but you add another 30 hours of collection, now it's a 75-hour game. $60 doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you get 75 hours of gameplay. You know, good for them. That's not me. I'm good on all of that. Yeah, I'm staying here. Hey, that's what we like to hear. Welcome, Cheddar. If they hate the game, even if they hate the game, what do you mean, miss? What's up, Kings? Good to see you, brother.
Time with it, and those who have enjoyed it but are reaching their limit, an easy out where they can stop playing yet not feel like they've left the game unfinished. It is understandable why the developers approached it in this way, and I'm not positive they were wrong to format it like this, especially given the fact that the game is designed with kids in mind, many of whom may not have the attention span to beat a 50-hour game but can manage something shorter. It's also possible that the gameplay of the post-game is designed with a more niche audience in mind, and if they had made that content a part of the main game, it would have alienated a large portion of players by making the core of the game feel like too much of a slog. Nevertheless, the choice to place it where they did led to me and players like me who are motivated most by beating a game to miss out on some content. Which is a bit of a shame, as I have heard from multiple people that the endgame of Arceus contains some of the most interesting story beats and moments in the game. Regardless of whether or not it was the right choice for Pokemon Legends Arceus to roll credits when they did, it does highlight how the placement of the credits can influence player behavior and satisfaction. As it defines the core experience most players will have, developers have to be cognizant of what they want that experience to entail. It's
funny that he chose that game. I beat Pokemon Arceus, and I didn't do jack shit after it. After I beat it, good, call it a day, moved on. I'm sure there was plenty of more content to go out and explore. I finished the story, beat the final boss, called it a day. You know, sunburn as hell, amazing, beautiful. Oh, I bet. I've always wanted to visit Colorado. That's definitely one of the bucket list places I have in the States. That's awesome. Welcome in, Spooter. Hope you're having a great day. Come on.
Slow Clap's Kung Fu beat 'em up, Sifu. The game consists of 5 levels so bad to work through, where they will take on hordes of enemies and tough as nails boss fights, both of which take considerable skill to overcome. Sifu's difficulty revolves around its resurrection mechanic, where every time the player character dies, they get older, and once they hit a certain age, they can no longer be revived and the player needs to restart the level. On a first playthrough, this will mean replaying each level over and over again to master the mechanics and finish at the lowest age possible, which is easier said than done. While playing, there were times I thought I'd never be good enough to get to the final boss at a reasonable age, but I kept trying and kept getting better, and after enough practice, I was able to not only get to the final boss, but also beat him. I felt that sense of
If you have never heard of him, one of my favorite content creators, his name's Afro Senju. He did an entire playthrough on this game. It was absolutely hilarious. Peak content. Go look him up. Go check that out. Spooter, what is this stream about? So this is just kind of, we're just kind of doing a chill stream today. I've never really done one of these before. So I have a list of videos that have piqued my interest. Bunch of different topics about video games themselves. Some are video essays, some are more comedy based, some are more introspective. So I just wanted to kind of watch some YouTube with some friends, hang out, watch some videos, and kind of give my thoughts and feedback on it, and hopefully get a discussion going and seeing what everyone thinks about them. Now, as far as Sifu is concerned, the premise of the game is so cool because it's got incredibly difficult combat, but the death and rebirth mechanic is so unique to that particular game versus other games that have kind of rebirth mechanics with adding the years every time you die. One of the things that he hasn't touched on, I don't know if he'll touch on it or not, as you get older and older in that game, you're able to do more damage, but you get way less of a health bar. So it's a constant mix and flow and match of just like, well, I hit a lot harder, but I'm also, I've got the HP bar of an ant. So this game in particular looks awesome. It's incredibly difficult, advanced combat style game, which normally I'm not really into, kind of like fighting games, but something about the mechanics and the storyline of that and just the rebirth mechanic alone has piqued my interest. So I do want to play this game. I don't know if I'll do it on stream or not, but this is definitely a game I want to play. Mountains above 12,000 feet are still snow capped. That is wild. I hope you watch Witcher 4 demo. I can do that. Yeah, I can add that.
the pride
Thank you,
and
Cheddar. I
relief that
appreciate you.
comes from finishing a hard
appreciate
game.
that.
However, and I'll be as non-specific
What's
as
up, La
possible
La
so I
Land?
don't spoil anything, right at the moment I expected the credits to roll, a cutscene played instead that indicated there was a slightly different way to approach each of the levels, and then it set me back to the start again. Even though the story hit a natural and satisfying conclusion, due to the credits not rolling, I felt like I needed to keep playing. So I jumped right back in and went through all the levels again. This time, instead of struggling for the slightest bit of progress, I used everything I had learned from the countless times I had gone through the levels before and beat all of them with ease. After dominating the final boss, I felt like a gamer god. And then I was finally met with the credits. The true ending of Sifu feels like the sort of thing that would normally be optional post-game content, there for dedicated players who want an additional challenge, but easily skippable for those not interested. However, by holding off on the credits, Slowclap made it a part of the core experience. As the credits rolled, I knew with complete certainty that had they come after beating the final boss for the first time, I would not have kept playing to see the true ending. And
To touch on that a little bit, another game that's on my backlog. I have an entirely too large of backlog. Every time I think about it, it gives me anxiety. Anyway, near automata or automata or however you pronounce it. Apparently, it did something very, very similar where you actually have to beat it a certain number of times to be able to get the pieces of the ending. And once you've completed it, I think it's like 5 times, then it kind of culminates everything together, and then you truly understand the story. So it's a very unique way of storytelling where it's like technically you roll credits, but in order to like actually get the answers that you're looking for, you have to dedicate that time to go through it and capture all of those endings and put them together. Expedition 33 is the most recent game I've kind of really played on my channel as far as a full playthrough. And this game had 2 endings. It had 2 endings, and it did such a wonderful job of drawing me in that once I finished the game and watched one of the endings, I immediately started a new playthrough. I was like, I have to see the other ending. I don't know what the secret is for game developers to be able to either, create that urge for their player base to want to go back and do it again to see the other ending. I don't know that, the true scope of like what that takes, but I know that some games do that for me and some games don't. So it's one of those things where it's just like that. It just is what it is. Um, Sifu is definitely the type of game that I would go through and I'd want to do it again. Obviously, Expedition 33. I'm sure there's plenty of other games that I could think of that do that. But it's interesting how some games it's like once you reach the credits, you're just like, I'm good. I'm done. I'm sure there's secrets. I'm sure there's whatever, but I'm fine. I'm good. And then there's others where like, no, I need more. What happens? I need to answer these questions. You know, I beat this game. It was pretty hard. Yeah, I've heard it was very, very difficult. Batman. Oh, baby. Justice. What's up, Wild Wipers? Good to see you, my friend.
And that would have sucked because I would have missed out on the amazing experience of witnessing how far I had come as a player. To be honest, until this experience with Sifu, I never spent much time thinking about how motivated I am by reaching a game's end credits, but now I can't stop thinking about it. And I find myself questioning whether or not I would have stuck with certain titles if their credits had rolled earlier. Like, would I have kept playing Hades had I seen the credits after the first time I beat the final boss instead of the 10th? Would I have played the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2 if they had separated it from the main game? Would I have searched for more endings in the Stanley Parable if there had been credits after
The Stanley Parable, I've never played it. I have watched some playthroughs of people playing it. That game is absolutely insane. If you don't know anything about it, I highly recommend you look into it. It's hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious, dude. The fourth wall breaks with the narrator. Just peak. Just so funny. Just absolutely awesome and hilarious. You need to check that out. The Stanley Parable.
every single one instead of just the Not Stanley ending. As these are all games I really cherish, I'd like to think that I would have continued with each of them, but given my track record, it doesn't look great. Ultimately, where to place the end credits ties into one of the great challenges of game design, determining which parts of a title should be mandatory and which should be optional. And as it turns out, there isn't an easy answer. If developers opt to make most content in a title mandatory, it could throw off the pacing, leading to a lot of bloat. Also, especially with less linear titles, if nearly everything is mandatory, it may take away some of the joy that comes with exploration. There is something special about uncovering secrets, of finding things that not everyone will find. It rewards curious players with new things to encounter and creates experiences unique to their playthrough. Of course,
Two points on that. One of the things I've said many times in my past streams when it comes to RPG games I've played on stream is I always say, like, it's kind of like a catchphrase at this point. It's like, remember, kids, always explore. If you find a main path, you can tell this is the main path that will make you go further and further into the story. Like, you're like, oh, that's a boss fight arena, or oh, all of the lamps are telling me that this is the main path. Always hit the side path first. Always try to uncover whether it's a secret to the story, whether it's a new weapon, whether it's an upgrade, whatever it might be. Always hit the alternate paths first. And I forgot my second point to that, but I did want to read Spooter's chat. It's just a similar premise to any creative field, like in writing for books. Some people always be satisfied just finishing the book, and some people will be compelled to finish the entire series. Game developers just do it in a slightly different way. The Stanley Power Parable is very good. I've played through every secret. I think that is impressive, because I heard there is just an absolutely absurd amount of secrets and branching paths in that game. So good on you.
the downside to not making things mandatory is that a portion of players will miss these things, and sometimes they may be an important
that reminded me. As far as missing content, some game developers are absolutely terrified of you missing any of their content. They break it down into such, what do you know? A baby's on the screen. He's probably about to touch on this. But they break it down to like such an easy way where if, like, there's no possible way that our players will be able to miss all of the story, all of the interaction. We want them to see every inch of our game, versus something like, which again, I'm going to tie back into From Software a lot because I absolutely love them. They're my favorite game developer. They don't care what you see or what you don't see. You could play through a game 5 times. This has happened to me. Elden Ring. I think I beat it 9 or 10 times. You could play through one of their games 5, 6, 7 times and still come across new things. like new secrets, new caves, new enemies, like a new weapon. The fact that they have so many different things spread out and you truly have to work to be able to find those items is, and the fact that you can go through your entire playthrough and they're like, yeah, sure. You might find them, you might not. It is what it is. Like I love that they have that much confidence in their games that they could have stuff that's just so unbelievably hidden. I mean, they have illusory walls where it's a wall until you attack it and then it disappears and it could lead to a completely new area of 10, 15 hours of content and 3 new bosses. And you could just walk right on by and never know it was there. It's insane to me. It's insane to me the amount of confidence they have in their product that they can do that.
Part of what makes a game great. For instance, let's look at the ending of Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a massive game with tons of secrets, from items to bosses to entire areas. On my first playthrough, I did some of the optional stuff, but was more focused on beating the game than anything else. So once I beat what I thought was the final boss and got to the end credits, I stopped playing. At the time, I knew there were more things I could explore as I hadn't cleared the map, but I didn't really know what those things entailed. A lot of it centered around collecting enough essence to improve the Dream Nail, which seemed a bit tedious. I had already gotten my dopamine hit and didn't want to tarnish.
I don't know what the hell a Dreamdale is, but if I had to collect a certain number of collectible items to then be able to see some sort of content at some point in time, I'm immediately not doing it. That part of the game is not meant for me.
That. So I convinced myself that whatever was left wasn't worth my time because I was able to beat the game without it. And while I do think that the Hollow Knight ending is fine, it doesn't hold a candle to the true ending. The real final boss, along with the steps it takes to get there, contains some of the most enjoyable and iconic moments in the game. When I went back to replay it last year and finally did everything, it launched Hollow Knight from being just a title I enjoyed to one that sits firmly in my top 5. The thing is, I wouldn't have known that there was more worth doing if people hadn't told me. Obviously, I understand that a lot of blame for that is on me for not exploring or being observant enough, but with optional content in games, it can be hard to know what will and won't be worth my time. Many titles throw out a slew of collectibles that don't amount to much, so when something feels that way, I pull back.
Yes.
And I can't help but wonder if I would have sought out the true ending in my first playthrough if instead of rolling credits after beating the Hollow Knight, it had given me a message like, "Yet the dream continues," and then set me back in dirt mouth. It's hard to know for sure, but given the...
It's kind of creepy how similar me and this guy have, like how similar our thought process on video games are. Something along those lines of, so the dream continues and it brings you back to the starting area. That would have hooked me. I mean, like, what did I miss? What do I got to do? Versus, oh, well, if you collect these 50 Spider-Man posters all across New York City, then you'll be able to unlock a 7-second cutscene. Okay. Cool, man. I'm good.
The fact that I'm so motivated by hitting the end credits, I think that would have been enough to get me to do the things I was reluctant to do in the first place. And with this, I find myself conflicted, because on one hand, I think experiencing the true ending is essential to fully understanding and appreciating Hollow Knight. But on the other, I think part of what makes it special for so many players is that it was something they earned through their own curiosity without the game telling them they needed to do it. Withholding the credits in an effort to incentivize players who didn't do everything into pursuing the true ending could cheapen that feeling for those who didn't need the push. Of course, I suspect a fair amount of people only learned about the existence of an alternate ending from external sources, which isn't ideal either, and that ends up being one of the big problems. As a player, it's difficult to know what optional content is worth doing, especially when part of what makes it worthwhile is the joy of discovering that it was worthwhile. I think I've just been conditioned over the years to assume that a lot of optional tasks won't have that special of a payoff, and the challenge is primarily there for folks who enjoy 100%ing every game they play. Operating under that assumption does lead to me missing important things, but it also protects my time, which I don't have enough of. All this is
also true. Yes, never enough time. Never enough time, too many video games, too much menial bullshit, not enough time. Sorry, I've got 30 other games in the backlog that I've been guilty about not playing. I need to try to get to them. I just don't want to spend another 30 hours on a collectathon.
Tough to sort out, and I find myself feeling pretty conflicted.
So I'm sure I've missed quite a bit of pretty impactful, whether it was bosses or cutscenes or whatever it might be. I'm sure I've missed plenty of stuff in some major video games I've played over the years, but that's just it. Sorry, time. You got to make me want to do it. One game I love to replay is a game called Alone in the Dark because I liked how much you can learn about the story if you play both characters if they have slightly different interactions. See, something like that is something I'd appreciate. Um, I could definitely see myself liking a video game like that. The One of the games I'm playing right now, it's called Wise of P. There is a DLC that just recently came out, so that's what I've been diving into was the DLC. But the game came out like 2-3 years ago. So what got me to want to play Lies of P for a second time was that, and I'm not going to dive into a whole story explanation of the game, but basically a lot of the major bosses are puppets, and they speak to you in like this crazy puppet language that you can't possibly understand. Once you beat the game and you go back through and you start again, now you can understand the puppets. And now you can understand what message they were trying to convey to you in the first playthrough, where it just seemed like, nonsensical, guttural noises. And it's unbelievable, like the cookie crumb trail that the developers left for you with the dialogue from these bosses that you didn't understand your first playthrough, that when you go back through and you play it again, you're like, holy shit, how, like, I never knew that, like, oh my god, that's insane. It's like, literally, it's like it opens your eyes to it, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, they were thinking in like 10 steps ahead, and they were playing chess and I was over here messing around playing checkers and I missed half the pieces. So it's just like that particular game is one of the ones that I immediately think about when it comes to like drawing me in to then come back and play it again. So something like being able to play the two different characters like you're talking about in Alone in the Dark, I could see that drawing me in, being able to see it from the two different perspectives and being able to take one piece of the story, the other piece of the story, and then putting them together to be able to get a full picture. I could definitely see the appeal of that.
Like, I think there is something intriguing about a game whose designers seem unconcerned with whether or not every player who beats it experiences its best content. But also, it seems like a terrible idea for designers not to do everything in their power to get players to engage with the most important parts of their title. And I've never felt more conflicted about this than I did after playing
Oh,
Nier
what do you know?
Automata. Nier Automata is a game that doesn't really begin until it ends. I would go as far to say that if you've only played through it once, you haven't really played it. And this seems to be a pretty commonly held opinion, as when I mentioned on Twitter that I was finally playing I got tons of responses telling me that I needed to beat it more than once. The first
Oh, darn it. I wanted to go back. I saw
playing it, I got tons of
the game, and I cannot understate this, is not even half over after the credits. A comment like that, if I were to see that on like one of my playthroughs, someone were to put something like that, immediately I'm just like, what is this person talking about? Like, not even half over? What did I miss? Something along those lines that, like, I don't know. Again, I don't know the secret to it for developers' sake, but the fact someone's just putting a comment like that, boom, I'm immediately hooked. I'm like, what did I miss? The collectibles are not hidden in obscure spots, so you could discover some of the hidden story without having to look too hard. I don't mind looking too hard. I mean, I try to, I'm not a completionist by any stretch of the imagination. But I am also someone that tries, like I mentioned earlier, I will go to all of the other alternate paths, try to complete them, and then come back and continue on the main path. So I don't mind that at all. I don't mind the exploration. I actually enjoy the exploration. It's when it gets to the point where it feels like it's just padded runtime. For instance, like the Zelda series, Breath of the Wild, and I can't remember what the other one is called, but the Korok seed thing. They've got like 500 freaking seeds in there. That is just padding runtime. And there's completionists out there that will do that. I say miss me with all of it. That's too much. Hope you're having a great day as well. I am, Angus. Thank you so much. I
Of
appreciate you.
responses telling me that I needed to beat it more than once. The first playthrough is satisfying enough, and it does feel like a complete game. Depending on how much you do, it will probably take anywhere from 10 to 30 hours to beat, and while parts of the narrative will feel a bit incomplete, the story is serviceable. However, seeing what really makes Automata special requires playing through it multiple times. The issue is that the game doesn't do the best job of making it clear that players should. After the end of the first credits, it does encourage players to do another playthrough with a message from the development team saying there are new perspectives to explore.
Okay, so let's say like I just finished the game and this is what I'm reading. To all players, thank you very much for playing Nier Automata. We have a special message for you. This game has several different storylines that change each time you play. You have witnessed the A route, but there are still many story elements and changes to the gameplay systems you have not yet seen yet. We highly recommend you play through again to witness the full Nier Automata experience. We hope you enjoy the rest of the game. What would have sold me right there was story elements and changes to the gameplay systems. I've been like, how much can they really change the gameplay from playthrough to playthrough? Immediately, I'd been like, what are we talking about here? We're changing gameplay systems after I just quote unquote beat the game? Take me to the title screen. Let's boot it up. Let's boot it up. Alone in the Dark isn't like two different stories. It's just one story from two different perspectives with such different lore depending on which character you pick from the start. Okay, I got you.
And story beats
I'm
to
understanding.
see. But
My
to be
bad,
honest, if I hadn't been
misunderstood.
told beforehand that I needed to beat it multiple times, this would have felt pretty close to when you beat a Mario game and it tells you you can now play as Luigi. A reason for some players to come back, but not one for me. This is amplified by the fact that the second playthrough is very similar to the first, so it isn't immediately obvious that it's worthwhile to continue. I was curious about how many players reached the true ending, so I looked at achievement and trophy stats from Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation to get an idea. And consistently across all three platforms, out of the players who finished ending A, less than half of them reached the final credits, with the biggest drop-off happening between ending A and ending B, which lost about a third of those players.
What's up, Cosmic?
It's a bit mind-boggling
How
to
are
me
you, my
that
friend?
so many people have technically finished the game, but will have a fundamentally different understanding of its stories, characters, and themes than those who reach the actual final credits. They truly are two different experiences.
I'm doing great, my man.
Honestly,
Doing
putting
great.
that much important content behind a credit roll is wild, and it's hard not to think it's a bad idea. In fairness, many folks in the target demographic for Nier Automata would be familiar with the game's director, Yoko Taro, so at least at launch, a large chunk of players would have been aware that this is how every game he makes operates.
Just like with what I was talking about earlier with From Software, these developers, the confidence they had in order to hide so much story and gameplay elements onto multiple playthroughs, that the people that will actually experience it are like the truly dedicated fans that'll go back and play it again and again. The fact that they had the confidence to hide that much content, spot on, top tier. I respect the hell out of them for it. The stream's going good, man. We're pretty new. We just started into it. We're only about 30 minutes deep. This is the first video on my list of videos I wanted to check out today. So we're going good. This one's called When Should a Game End? It's talking about
However,
when should a game end? Should it be at the final ending and cutscene credits roll, or should you have games that you have to do multiple playthroughs in order to see them?
especially when a
What's
game
up,
is
Razbuten?
that critically acclaimed, there's going to be people going in without that knowledge. And for them, some of the most important stuff of the game would be so easy to miss. Had there been no credits after ending A, I imagine more people would have kept playing and eventually reached the final credits. Of course, the fact that so much of the game is hidden behind a credit roll is part of what makes it interesting. It breaks down typical game conventions, and I won't get into specifics as to keep this as spoiler-free as possible,
Sounds good,
but it
bro.
does some unique
Have a
things
great
with
stream.
its various credit rolls that justify there being so many of them. Also, based on what I know about Yoko Taro, I don't think he cares whether or not people stop playing his games because they can't get on board with his creative direction. He seemingly makes titles he wants to make, and would rather do something interesting that loses people than compromise his vision.
He
Which
seems
is
like an
hard not to respect.
interesting individual.
It's also worth noting that what I view as the intended or optimal way to experience a game almost certainly is not universal. There are surely players who who loved ending A but hated every playthrough after that, who adored Hollow Knight up until they got to the White Palace, and who resented having to play through Sifu an additional time to get the credits to roll. At the end of the day, when it comes to determining what to make optional versus what to make mandatory, developers are deciding between presenting that content in a way that will make it more likely for every player to experience it, even though it may not appeal to all of them, or presenting it in a way that will lead to fewer folks engaging with it, but those who do will be far more likely to enjoy it, as they're the type of players who search for that kind of thing. And I find myself not really knowing what the right answer to all of this is.
Same. I do not know the right answer. It's definitely a balancing act between the different sets of the player base for sure, and striking the right balance between those two is got to be unbelievably difficult. Um, I don't really know if there is a right answer. Some games will resonate with people more than others. But as a video game developer, if you are able to nail it, I'm telling you, people will tell their friends, word of mouth will happen, and you will sell an assload of copies if you hit that right balance.
To be honest, when I started writing this script, I firmly believed that most games, especially ones with important optional content like Hollow Knight and Nier Automata, would benefit from delaying their credit rolls. At the very least, this sort of thing would be good for me and players like me, as it would make it more clear that I should engage with certain aspects of a title. However, as I got further into actually writing the script, it became hard to shake the idea that there is value in being able to miss something. It makes it a mystery that people have to work towards, whether it be on their own or as a community, and it rewards players with something substantial for their effort. Effort not every player wants to put in. So yes, there is value to Sifu's approach of making players prove they have mastered the game to be rewarded with the credits. But there is also value in titles that withhold their most important moments and only share them with those willing to look. With every game though, there should be a purpose behind the choice of where to place the credits. Where a title like Nier Automata aims to say something with its structure, one like Pokemon Arceus seemingly just wanted to have a lot of post-game content and made a short-sighted decision by placing important story moments after the credits. Frankly, I wish I was the kind of player who's driven to find every secret in a game in the hopes that it will lead to something incredible. But
I
I'm
don't
not. And I expect
slightest.
that I'll still stop playing games after seeing the end credits. It's just who I am. So while I do hope to see more titles find ways to push me to engage with content I'd probably enjoy but am likely to miss, with most titles I'll have to keep relying on people on Twitter telling me what I should and shouldn't pursue in them. As odd as it may sound, I could talk about end credits all day. They're an aspect that we often look at as separate from the game itself, but it can have such a huge impact on pacing and presentation. In fact, this script originally was far longer and talked way more in depth about certain end credits, but I realized that a lot of what I had was less about when to roll them and more about credit sequences I really liked. So I decided to take the stuff I cut from this script and create an extra video about my favorite credit sequences in video games that you can watch right now on Nebula. Nebula is a streaming service made and owned.
We're gonna call it there. I think that was a great video. I agreed with a lot of what he said, and it's like I said, it was kind of creepy with how on point we both were when it came to our perspective on on most of the points on this game. This was When Should a Game End by Razbuten. Now this came out 3 years ago, which is crazy. I just found out about this recently. So yeah, make sure to drop that dude a like. I mean, obviously he's a substantially larger channel than I am. Most of them will be, if we're being 100% honest, but I like always making sure to give them credit for their original content. So Razbuten, you did a phenomenal job, my friend. Suggest you look at Alone in the Dark. Just I warn you, it is a puzzle game with some combat and scary aspects, and a game that has a lot of reading to understand the puzzles and lore. A game developer, I believe that if you as a game developer, I believe that if you want more content after the end of your game, you should hint at that. Yeah. If you give, as long as you give hints to the players so that the ones that, will actually go out and do that, they'll know that there's something to go do. And then I think you're fine. But yeah, no, I really like that video. That was a really good video. Let's